Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now what I've got whizzing around in front of me today is kind of an experiment. The idea here wasn't so much to record how I do paint things, but how I was going to paint something. So this fella is from Anvil Industry. He is one of this month's trenches. They are available up on Patreon, and they will eventually be available on their website and through my mini factory. There's also a bunch of these guys already available in resin in a similar style. If you go all the way back to the Savlar Chemdogs video I did a couple of years ago, it's a very similar style. But the legs and a couple of the torsos in this set are a wee bit different. So I've printed this fella myself at home on my Saturn 4, and I'm ready to crack on and paint something. This is kind of a continuation of the Death Guard project that's ongoing, and I've got an eye that when they're finished, I want to add some solar auxilia to the army. But I wanted to have a play around and test out how would I get that Barbaran auxiliary look. So this poor fella was the unfortunate test subject. If you like how he looks though, bit of an intro there. All of the paints for this will be listed in the description below, the same as always. So let's get started. So, of course, once our fella is assembled, the first thing to do is to prime him. Now, I've done my usual thing here of starting off by priming him completely in matte black, and then from above, so that we get a little bit of the matte black left in the recesses, and from underneath, I've sprayed him with brain matter beige. Now, this isn't strictly necessary. You can go ahead and just prime him in brain matter beige completely, or even white. But I tend to like, there's two things that happen doing it this way. You get a little bit of texture to some of the areas, particularly parts where that brain matter beige is not going to settle terribly well. So you get this gritty, it's a moody kind of shading that you get back there, and I like that. And secondly, it does a bit of the work for us. Not having to go in and shade, carefully layer up some of these bits, it looks cool, and it works well for large batches of infantry. So the same as with any other miniature, we're going to start off from the places where we're most likely to make him mess. And that's going to be, for this fella, his eyes. I have here poppy red, and this will be nice and quick just to dollop into the lenses there. I quite like poppy red because it stays nice and bright even after it's had a shade. So we'll let that dry. Boogie, 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 boogie. Now, the parts that are going to be leather and soft equipment and stuff like that, what I'm going to use is noble skin. Now, this one has quite an interesting color because it's almost a natural, more leathery sort of black. It's like a darker rattling grime. Like if you've used the contrast colors, and rattling grime was like, ooh, I like that, but maybe if it was darker. Well, it's noble skin. So I'm going to use this on boots, his gloves, and I'm also going to use it on the straps of his gear. I'll see if I can keep this in the shot for a change. The idea here is I want to use colors that are visible and prevalent on my Death Guard. And when I come to painting the infantry to ally with them, they'll fit together. Now for the metal parts, well, some of them anyway, I have broadsword silver. Now, I'm going to go over the weapon and things like this with this broadsword silver, but I would recommend, when it comes time to do like buckles and things like that, I'm going to swap to a traditional acrylic. But for laying down a metal base coat, man, this stuff, it is the business. Now, for the armor, what I have is Horde Bronze, and this is going to go over pretty much everything that we haven't done already in metallic. So starting on the shoulder pad here, it's a nice deep color. And you may find going back and forth over a panel a couple of times, just sweep your brush, will help to give you a nice smooth finish on those panels. So here we go, over everything that I want to be bronze. Now, because this dries so shiny, it can be a little difficult to see what you're going to get. But I do want a slightly more solid color. So what I'm going to do is go over it again with the same speed paint. Now that is much more the color I had in mind, and we still get a little bit of the highlighting from the speed paint effect, which is pretty cool. I'm going to use now pallid bone for any last little bits, like the fabric down here on his, they're not quite gaiters. The backing on the armor plates he's got here has a little bit of fabric. And again, I'm going to stick to colors that kind of speak to an association with the Death Guard. And then, speaking of colors that are going to be reminiscent of the Death Guard, I have here algae green. And somebody actually made fun of me once for how I pronounce algae. What is it to you? Algae? Algae? It's algae, isn't it? Anyway, I'm using this here. Not every miniature is going to have a little spot for a spot color like this. But for those that do, a little bit of green, a little bit of bone, just cementing that connection. Now those metallic parts that I mentioned earlier, I'm now going to touch in with a tiny wee bit of plate mail metal. It's going to be quite fussy, and you don't necessarily need to do this. Like, if you want to leave these straps in particular, just leave them. But a wee bit of extra silver here is going to look cool. And then just a wee bit of matte black to fill in the mask canister. And once I'm done with this, what I'm going to do is grab a little bit of bone matter beige from the pot and just cover up any little bits and pieces where I may have splurged over, which need touching up. Now at last we come to the point where I'm not 100% certain this is going to work the way that I thought it would. But that's the point of experimenting. Sometimes you just don't know. So what I've mixed up, this is 2 drops of the Grimdark Shadow to 1 drop of Speed Paint Medium, because I want this to run a little more fluidly than it would if it were neat. Oh, that does work. Oh god, that's reassuring. Okay, I am going to douse the entire miniature in my slightly thinned Grimdark Shadow mix. Ah, that's bloody good. Okay. I've seen wonderful things happen with the bronze under this greeny black, and I wanted to see if that would work across more. And, oh gosh, yes, okay, I think we have a winner. So I'm going to douse the entire miniature with this, and then we'll leave it to dry. Give them about half an hour somewhere warm. As always with these shades, once you've popped them on, give it a couple of seconds, and then shift it around as and where you like to get a nice smooth effect from it. Anyhow, relieved as I am, you probably heard that. Let's come back once this guy is dry. Now, lucky, that did exactly what I was hoping it would do. So sometimes you can have a pretty good idea. It might not turn out the way you like. Sometimes it will. So what I've got is a little bit of fresh brain matter beige. I'm just going to use this to pick out a few areas, a few little highlights. You don't need to do this, but it's going to introduce a bit more shape to some of these larger areas of the uniform. Now, on a Solar Auxilia fella, you probably won't need to do this at all, but I think it's going to look cool. Need isn't really the metric here. Now I do want to come back and do a little bit of highlighting on the metallic stuff. If I do that now, like before I matte varnish them though, what's going to happen is that those are going to dull down quite a bit and the shine's going to go from the metal almost completely. So what I'll do is to matte varnish the miniature first and then do my highlights. So, okay, I've changed my mind and I've gone slightly mad. What I should have done, I think, would have been to apply pallid bone to the uniform before washing it, the whole thing, and not just those little gaiter add-ons. But if I apply pallid bone over the top of what I have done, it's going to get rid of some of the green in the shade mix. So instead, in order to get kind of the same finish as doing it the right way around, what I've done is to thin down pallid bone about half and half with the speed paint medium. So I would suggest, if you do want to try this at home, to do the pallid bone over the entire uniform first before shading. but it won't be entirely unsalvageable if you do want to come back and get that more bony finish, which I think, yeah, for these guys, does scream a bit more Death Guard. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll touch up those highlights again, and then I'm going to matte varnish them. Now that is exactly what I wanted. What I'd suggest here would definitely be to do the pallid bone first, then the grimdark wash, and then the highlights. And I think that'll come out maybe a little bit more yellow than what I've got here, but that grimy, yeah, yellowy, gungy, oh, it's gross. It's perfect for what I had in mind. And from here, there's actually not a huge amount left to do. What I am going to do is grab a tiny bit of that plate mail metal from earlier, and what we're going to use this for is just to pick out a few little bits on some of the brassy areas. You don't have to do very much of this because the speed paint will actually work quite well, giving you your natural highlights and all that. But places where you want a little bit of chipping, a little bit of extra definition, and just a tiny bit of a brighter metallic will work well here. Yeah, dude, let's base this sucker. Let's call him done. Recipe for that will be in the description. I could probably come back and dry brush a little of that tank if I wanted to, but nah, this will do. This is fine. Let's get a look at what he looks like when he's all finished. And so there at last, our test figure, our flamethrower guy, whatever we're going to call him, is complete. And I really had a lot of fun fooling around for a change. I think it's important sometimes to pick up a little palette cleanser, to do something new. There's all sorts of miniatures out there, deep cut stuff, or the D&D figures and things like that. Just little one-shots you can pick up on the cheap if you want something to just completely change what it is you're painting. And I think it's good to expand your repertoire a little bit sometimes. This fella, of course, is not pushing the boat out terribly far from what I usually paint, but it was worth, especially with the colour of his uniform, just having the chance there, really, to make a mistake. And 0 stakes, fix it in my own time to what I was happy with. Really gives me some good ideas for how I'd continue this colour scheme. So, as always, thanks goes out to Exit23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of my wonderful patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue, including my most gorgeous producers who are showing up on screen now. Thank you very much for your support, folks. Now, any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comment box below. My Blue Sky and Instagram are both linked there too. So, thank you very much for your time, one and all, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.